to Bear Lifestyle, the podcast where we talk about taboo topics to make them normal and acceptable. I'm your host, Simona Spark, and I'm so happy that you are here. We are about to get naked by stripping away insecurities, judgments, and all kinds of limitations to reveal the essence of who we really are, Bear. Bold, authentic, radical, express. Let's go. Hello, welcome to today's podcast. Let's start with celebrations. Celebrating with tea today. I'm celebrating myself, I'm celebrating you, and everyone who listens and watches this podcast. Cheers, cheers. Welcome to Bear Lifestyle Podcast. Welcome back for those of you that been here before. I'm glad that you're here again. And for those of you that landed here for the first time, I am so happy that you find this space. The space where my intention is, as said in the intro promo, to talk about taboo topics so we could normalize them and make them acceptable. So today I've decided to have a bear conversation about fantasies. Who doesn't have those, right? So now, if you've been here before, you know that there is two magical spaces that I've created, Queen's Dungeon and King's Dungeon. So please open the show notes and look for those links. And in these two spaces, I talk quite a bit about tools and techniques and intentions of taking you out of the la la land, the fantasy world, and bring you into the present, into your life, into what is it that you are doing right now. So, why do we travel to fantasy world? I wanted to start the conversation about fantasies, wondering what if fantasies are nothing else but just sexy, sophisticated strategies for us to not look to the parts or in the places that we are not comfortable. Stay with me with this. Think about this. We've been conditioned to hold a part of us, a part of our identity that lives in a fantasy world. Look at all the pieces, right? It could start as innocent, if you wish, as our capacity to dream and to desire, right? I want this for my life. I want this for my future. And then we call it fantasy. Why do we call it fantasy? As soon we call it fantasy, what we are doing, this strategy is sophisticated, okay? What we are doing is we also created a backup plan in which if that doesn't happen, what do we dream and what we desire? We give ourselves an excuse that was too big, that was unrealistic, was just a fantasy, was just a dream. Now, put a pin on that one and let's look in a different direction. Why do we escape in a fantasy world when we are in a space of intimacy? Again, look at that strategy. What is it happening in a moment by yourself or with your partner that you're not allowing yourself to see, to address, to feel, and instead in your mind you escape in a fantasy world? Put a pin on that one. And then number 3, let's look a little bit closer to desires, right? Desires that sometimes they are triggered by everyday life, you know, it's a song, it's a event that you will witness, it's a movie, and it triggers this deep inner desire that might be something that you would like to have or you would like to experience, regardless if it's in your life, in your relationships, in your sex life, it doesn't matter, right? But just that deep desire that is triggered, and then the minute that you catch it and you feel it and you acknowledge it, you just kind of push it down and say, oh, that's just a fantasy. I'm not going to tell anybody about it. So let's pin that one, right? So now we have these three aspects. I mean, we could go on, and you have your own. And as always, just pull up a piece of paper and just have a radical, honest conversation with yourself and write down all these places, triggers, justifications that you have around fantasy and fantasy world and such. I mentioned those three places because those are the most common. And of course, we are generalizing here, but just for the simplicity of this conversation. So now, why do I call this a sexy, sophisticated strategy? What are we hiding? We are hiding behind fantasies 100%. Why we are doing that? Because we are avoiding something. We are avoiding dealing with reality. We are avoiding dealing with having an open conversation about our desires. And for all of them, and underneath of everything, whatever comes up for you, we do not want to be vulnerable. We do not want to be vulnerable. If I take the responsibility of bringing my fantasy into reality, I will have to talk about it. I will have to look at the pieces they are holding me back from materializing that fantasy. So what could go there? Trauma, pain, insecurities, limiting beliefs, all of that, right? So now I might take you too fast, too deep, but I trust that you could hold on this because I don't want you to stop there. I don't want you to identify all these insecurities and trauma and to say, well, yeah, I agree or I don't disagree, whatever way you are. It's all good, all welcome. But then what do we do with it? I don't want to just leave you there. Let's go a layer deeper and look at what's underneath of all of them. What's underneath of all of them is how do you feel? So I really want to encourage you to look at all these pieces. If you made a list, you know me with the list and with menus. If you made a list of what are the pieces that I don't want to be vulnerable with, I don't want to look at, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to address them, right? Just feel how does that make you feel and what is the feeling that doesn't let you look at that particular piece. Now, a lot of emotions and feelings could be triggered there and we experience, but what I learned for the past few years doing this work and doing a lot of identity work is that we could take all the feelings and emotions and sum them down to three major ones, which are guilt, shame, and fear. Guilt, shame, and fear. So now, here's the exercise for you. This podcast gets to be a coaching sequence, right? So if you are willing to look at those pieces, let's structure it a little bit. So we could start with take a piece of paper, identify what fantasy is for you, identify the area in your life where you find yourself thinking, saying, feeling, behaving in a way that you justify that it's a fantasy. Okay, next step, we take that a little bit deeper and have a radical, honest, bare conversation with yourself and ask yourself, what are the pieces that you don't want to look at them? Is it the pain? Is it the trauma? What's the trigger? What's the insecurity? Make a list of those. When that is done, go to each and every one of them and look underneath it to identify what is hidden there. Guilt, shame, or fear. You might identify other emotions, but I would really encourage you to look under that emotion and see guilt, shame, and fear. When you identify all of this, you are in a really good space, because now you get to start the healing process. And I know the level of vulnerability to say out loud, what are you feeling guilty about? What are you ashamed of? What are you afraid of? To say it to yourself first, and then to communicate it to your partner or to your friend or to your boss, whatever the area is, whatever you identify, right? Vulnerability is scary, but vulnerability is the only way that you could take that fantasy and bring it into reality. It's about taking the responsibility to make that happen. Because why don't you have it yet? Because of guilt, shame, and fear. That it's coming from trauma, from triggers, from conditioning, from limiting beliefs, from insecurities. Do you see? So you get to go as deeper as you want, step by step, and then you do the healing coming back to the surface through those layers. But you gotta be willing to go there. You gotta be willing to say the goddamn thing. Be vulnerable. Look at the piece. It's safe. It's safe to look at the piece. Why? Because it's our past. It already happened. We can't change it. That moment is gone. What is left from it are those pieces that we're still holding in our body. And it doesn't serve us. Because here we are, we have interests and curiosities and desires and dreams, and we cannot reach them because those pieces are frozen. But we have the power and the ability to go in and heal them. And no, I don't want to hear that that's just a fantasy. I don't want to hear that the dream is too big. None of that. It's your desire. If you feel the desire for a split of a second, you're supposed to have it. The question is, why do you hide that desire? And pay attention when I say hide. I have clients trying to convince me that it's like, oh, I don't want that anymore, which is, it's easy to accept. But the truth is, desire never dies. You might say that you don't want it anymore for two reasons. One is because you deny that desire. You just kind of like push it in, pretend that it's not there. Or that desire evolved as you evolve. So again, I want to invite you to have a bare, radical conversation with yourself and just identify where your desire is. Did you just hidden it deeper into your system, or that desire evolve into something else as you evolve? My point being, the desire is always there and never dies. As soon as we have it, it's there, it's with us. And the only way that we could materialize it is to actually be vulnerable about it. So I don't know about you, but I am in a space where I no longer fantasize. And I don't care if it's about my future, my life, my business, my sex life, my financial life, doesn't matter what part of my life. I used to say that I have a fantasy about it. At this point, it's like, I'm not fantasizing. I'm willing to show up every day to find ways in which I could bring that into reality. No more fantasies, just unforgettable memories. That has been my mantra, my long mantra of last year, turning the wildest fantasies into unforgettable memories, meaning I have to bring them into reality and enjoy them and explore them, right? So I swim it down to unforgettable, that I tattoo it on my wrist. And the only way that I know to do that is to looking at the goddamn thing and to recognize that, oh, I'm hiding those parts. And nobody's gonna bring them up and heal them for me besides myself. People, life will trigger those pieces. And you have two options: to blame on them because they triggered them, or to be grateful for them they triggered them, because Now you could pull them up and do the work. So that is the conversation that I want to have with you today. I do want to remind you here that if you want to look at the fantasy piece in intimacy space, then I highly, highly recommend to join the dungeons. So we have the Queen's Dungeon for women and the King's Dungeon for men. Please open the show notes and find the links there. Those workshops are filled with valuable information, techniques, strategies, and practices in which you could experience pleasure. All of them, I create them to take you few layers deeper into the healing, into the expanding, with obviously the intention of, as I say for the beginning of this podcast, taking you out of the fantasy world, porn, la la land, dreams, imaginations, and bringing you into the present moment so you could actually experience life, experience pleasure, regardless if you're by yourself or with a partner or with partners, whatever the situation might be. So please open the show notes and check out the dungeons. And until next week, I wish you a fantastic day, a fabulous week, and go ahead and have a bear experience into the reality, not into the fantasy world. Cheers, everyone. And this is where we landed. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And if you enjoyed the show, make sure you leave me a review to let me know. For more bear experiences, please go to simonaspark.com/bear and follow us on Instagram at simonasparkworld. I can't wait to have you back. Until then, be bear, bold, authentic, radical, expressed. See you next time.